Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. Today's story will have you questioning everything about trust, silence, and the things people only do when they think you're not watching. It started with one glass. A wine glass. Still full. Sitting on the kitchen counter at 7:03 a.m. The lipstick wasn't mine, and I sure as hell didn't pour it. No note. No sorry, I crashed at Zoe's. No blanket tossed over the couch. Just silence. A silence that screamed. At 7:04, I walked back into the bedroom and stared at her side of the bed, still perfectly made. She never came home. The worst part? I wasn't surprised. The second worst part? I still made coffee for two. Out of habit. She told me she'd be dropping by her ex's party. Just to say hi. That was 12 hours ago. And I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to. I nodded like I always do. Smiled like a man who didn't feel small. She wore earrings I hadn't seen in months and called it no big deal. So no, I wasn't surprised. But I was hollow. Like someone had taken a core sample out of me while I slept. By 7:12 a.m., I had already done something I'd never done before. I unplugged our digital photo frame. I took the Polaroid off the fridge. The one from our anniversary trip to Maine, where she pretended to love me for 48 hours straight. I dropped both into the donation box next to the front door. Not because I hated her, but because something inside me had quietly decided I don't belong in my own life anymore. And that thought, that one slippery little thought, would become the reason why, by the time she finally returned. The house no longer remembered her name. By 9:41 a.m., the front door creaked open. She didn't tiptoe. She didn't hesitate. She walked in with the confidence of someone returning from brunch, not from an overnight disappearance. The keys clinked into the ceramic bowl near the entrance. Her heels clicked lightly on the hardwood as she passed the hallway mirror and adjusted her hair. She didn't say my name. She didn't ask if I was awake. She didn't look for me. From my silent position in the living room, I watched the whole thing. My coffee had long gone cold. I sat there, statue still, gripping the armrest like it was the only thing keeping me upright. I had spent the night chewing my own thoughts down to the bone, and now she was back, as if none of it had happened. She took off her earrings, dropped them into the shallow dish beside the keys, kicked off her shoes, and headed toward the bathroom. I still hadn't spoken. I couldn't. There was something in my throat that felt jagged, sharp, like if I said even one word, the entire dam inside of me would collapse. I heard the water start running. Her humming followed. Humming. Cheerful. As if staying overnight at her ex's party was just another item on the weekend checklist. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the normalcy of it. Like my pain was background noise. Eventually, she emerged in a towel, fresh-faced, and looked at me like she'd forgotten I existed. "Oh, you're up early." That's when I broke the silence. "You never texted." She blinked, tilting her head slightly, as if I had asked something confusing. "It got late. I didn't think waking you up would help anything. You always get so reactive." Reactive. Like I was the one with the problem. Like her spending the night at a man who once begged her to marry him wasn't inherently disturbing. "You could have just let me know," I said, trying, and failing, to keep my voice from cracking. "It's not a big deal, Lyle," she replied, wrapping her arms around herself as if she was the victim now. "Nothing happened. We had drinks, we laughed, people crashed. I wasn't the only one. It wasn't about you." There it was. It wasn't about you. She said it so casually, like she was clarifying a scheduling conflict. Like the context didn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than anything. Because the truth wasn't in her words. It was in what she chose to leave out. In the smug calmness. The way she never actually said she slept alone. The way she never offered a hug, or a guilty smile, or even an ounce of softness. I couldn't sit anymore. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen, not to be dramatic, just to breathe. I felt like I was trapped inside a stranger's life. And the worst part was, I still loved her. Even in that moment. Even after everything. I still loved her, and hated myself for it. She followed a few minutes later. "Are we really going to turn this into a thing?" she asked, opening the fridge like we were discussing what to make for lunch. "No," I said quietly. "It's already a thing. You just weren't here to see it." She gave me a look I'll never forget. Not angry. Not sorry. Just tired. Like I was exhausting to deal with. Like my hurt was a chore. That was the moment I knew she'd stopped seeing me. Not as a man. Not as a partner. Not even as someone who needed the truth. Just static. Background. A husband-shaped inconvenience. And that was the same moment I realized something inside me had changed permanently. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to ask questions she'd never answer honestly. I was done performing grief for someone who wouldn't notice if I disappeared. So instead, I started removing myself from the house she no longer noticed. One drawer at a time. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam a single door. Instead, I started vanishing the way fog retreats under sunlight. Slow, silent, and nearly invisible unless you're really looking. And she wasn't looking. It began with the books. My books. She never touched them anyway. One by one, I slid them off the shelf in our shared office and packed them neatly into a storage box I labeled just space. That's what I told myself I was making, space. Not an escape. Not a statement. Just space. The next morning, I took down my framed diploma from the hallway wall. She didn't notice. I folded my college hoodie, the one she used to wear when she felt cold or nostalgic, and placed it in the donation bag by the door. Still nothing. On Wednesday, I cleared out my shaving kit from the bathroom. I left the toothbrush, for now. Baby steps. We brushed side by side in silence that evening. She didn't ask about the missing cologne or my razor. She was too busy looking at her phone, probably texting Zoe. Or Vince. Or maybe both. I noticed she'd started sleeping facing the wall. That used to mean she was mad at me. Now it just meant she didn't care. I didn't dare touch her anymore. I'd reach out and feel rejection radiating off her back like heat from a dying furnace. You know the part that stung the most? It wasn't the party. It wasn't the night she didn't come home. It was the slow erosion of being noticed. Like I'd become a ghost with a day job and a Wi-Fi password. She didn't see me cleaning out the hall closet. Didn't ask why half my jackets were suddenly gone. When I rearranged the kitchen drawers to make room for only one set of utensils, she just frowned slightly and muttered, "Weird. Weird." That's what she called the unraveling of a life. But it wasn't weird. It was deliberate. It was survival. Because for the first time in years, I stopped hoping she'd notice what she was doing to us, and started taking notes on what I'd need to survive after she left me emotionally bankrupt. And even if she hadn't said it aloud yet, she had already left. I was just the one still paying the electricity bill. Then came Friday, exactly 1 week after that night. She came home later than usual. No explanation. No apology. She dropped her purse on the floor instead of hanging it on the hook, something she used to get mad at me for doing. Her heels scuffed across the tile. She didn't kiss me. She didn't even glance at me. And then, from the kitchen doorway, she said it. "I think we should take some space." There was no thunder in her voice. No crack in her expression, just that same flat, clinical tone, like she was ordering a different brand of toothpaste. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I had already been gone all week, and she never noticed. "What kind of space?" I asked. My voice came out hoarse, but steady. She shrugged. "Just time apart. I don't know. I feel like we've lost connection." Connection. That word hit like a slap. You feel like we lost connection? I wanted to say, you disappeared into the night with your ex and came back like I was the maintenance guy. But I didn't say it. I nodded. Then I reached into the cabinet, pulled out a second mug, and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. "Space," I said quietly. "You take yours. I'll take mine." She narrowed her eyes like I'd said something clever or something dangerous. But neither of us moved. We stood in that kitchen with a world's worth of words unsaid between us. And that's when I knew. She wasn't expecting me to go anywhere. She thought I'd just wait here, like I always had. But what she didn't know was that I already had a place to go, and she wouldn't find out where until it was too late. The funny thing about leaving is that it doesn't always start with suitcases. Sometimes it begins with a calendar notification. Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Apartment keys ready. Mail forwarding confirmed. Bank access removed. Joint account closed. I had rehearsed each step in my head like a war plan. Not because I wanted revenge. I wasn't bold enough for that. I didn't want her to feel pain. I just wanted her to feel absence. Absence of me. Of everything I used to give her without her asking. The clean laundry. The coffee in the morning. The man she stopped thanking. I was the background of her life, and I decided it was time to fade out completely. I didn't leave a dramatic note. I didn't even take everything. Just the essentials. A week's worth of clothes, my old record player, a pair of worn sneakers, and my dignity, or whatever scraps of it I had left. The apartment I moved into wasn't impressive. Just a short-term lease on the east end of town. The walls smelled like fresh paint, and the carpet had that weird stiffness of hotel floors. But it was mine. It had silence I could trust, not the kind that suffocates you, but the kind that lets you breathe. The moment I slid my last box into the small closet and stood there in the quiet, I realized I had nothing left to prove to her. And that terrified me, because for so long, every action I took, every meal I cooked, every holiday I planned, every "I'm sorry" I said first, was about convincing her that I was worth choosing. And she never said it, but deep down, I knew. She had made her choice a long time ago. She just hadn't gotten around to informing me. And now, I was gone. But I didn't ghost her. That's not who I am. I left her a message, not a handwritten letter, not a voicemail. Just a single text, sent at 5:03 p.m. when I knew she'd be out of the house. Hey, I needed space too. Don't worry, I'm safe. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Take care of the cat. That was it. No dramatic punctuation. No accusations. No tears. I turned off my phone and spent the night unpacking in silence. And then, on Sunday morning, less than 18 hours later, I made a mistake. I went back. Not to talk. Not to reconcile. I didn't even knock on the door. I just wanted to see. I parked across the street like some cliché movie character. Hoodie up, sunglasses on, sipping a gas station coffee like I wasn't completely unraveling inside. And that's when I saw her. The front door opened, and there she was, standing barefoot on the porch, holding a phone to her ear with one hand and twirling her hair with the other. She looked relaxed, not distraught, not shocked, just tired, mildly annoyed, like someone waiting for an Uber that was 10 minutes late. Then someone stepped out behind her. A man. He was taller than me, leaner, wearing a plain white tee and sweatpants, like he belonged there, like he'd just woken up next to her. I didn't need to see his face. I didn't need to hear what they were saying. I already knew. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like gravity had betrayed me. All the denial I had stored in the corners of my mind just shattered. I drove away before they noticed me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my coffee. I just sat in the car in the Target parking lot 3 blocks away and stared at the steering wheel like it had answers. So this was it. The truth I'd been avoiding. It wasn't just emotional distance. It wasn't miscommunication. She had someone else. And suddenly, every unfinished sentence, every cold glance, every night she turned away in bed made sense. I had spent the last year losing a competition I never knew I was in. But I wasn't angry. I was just done. And now the question wasn't whether she'd notice I was gone. The question was what she'd do when she realized I wasn't coming back. It was Tuesday afternoon when she finally called. 3 days had passed since I moved out. 3 days of breathing in silence that didn't come with judgment, sighs, or passive-aggressive questions disguised as compliments. I had gotten used to the absence of footsteps, the stillness of my own space. I had even found comfort in the creaks of my ceiling fan and the cheap rattle of the dryer. I didn't expect peace to be this quiet, or this lonely. My phone buzzed, and her name lit up the screen like a landmine I had forgotten to disable. I stared at it for a full minute. I didn't want to hear her voice. Not because I hated her, I don't think I ever could, but because I wasn't sure if hearing her would pull me right back into the mess I had finally crawled out of. I answered anyway. "Hey," she said softly, like she was calling to check on the weather, not the husband who had disappeared from her life without a fight. I didn't say anything. I came home Sunday, and everything was gone. I still didn't speak. I mean, not everything, she corrected quickly, her voice shaky now. Just you. Your stuff. The presence of you. Still nothing from me. Not out of spite. Just out of complete emotional exhaustion. I felt like if I opened my mouth, I might either cry or laugh, and neither seemed appropriate. "I don't understand," she continued. "You could have said something. We were supposed to be figuring things out." That line. We were supposed to be figuring things out. As if I was part of some mutual process. As if I hadn't been left behind on a sinking ship while she was off testing lifeboats with other passengers. Finally, I spoke. My voice was calmer than I expected. "You asked for space. I gave it to you." "I didn't mean for you to vanish," she snapped, and there it was, the first crack in her controlled tone. "You just disappeared. No warning. You disappeared first, Clarabelle. You just didn't have to pack." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing. I could almost imagine her sitting on the edge of the bed, one foot tucked under her leg, hand pressed to her forehead, like she was the one trying to figure out what went wrong. "I didn't cheat on you," she finally whispered. Funny how that's always the first thing they clarify. Not what they did do, but what technical boundary they believe they didn't cross. "I saw him," I said flatly. "I saw you two on the porch." Another silence. Deeper this time. Heavier. He just stayed the night. We talked. That's all." I closed my eyes. I don't know what hurt more, the admission or the half-hearted attempt to clean it up. "You know what's worse than being lied to?" I asked, being treated like I'm too naive to even deserve a convincing one. She didn't reply, so I said it, the thing I hadn't planned on saying but needed to release. "I loved you so hard I stopped recognizing myself. I gave you comfort, stability, a life with no chaos. And you made me feel like that wasn't enough. Like I wasn't enough." "Lyle." "No," I cut in. "You don't get to say my name like it still belongs in your mouth." For a moment, I expected her to hang up, but she didn't. Instead, she whispered something that nearly broke me. "I think I miss you more now than when we were living together." And I swear, in that moment, I felt the sharpest twist of irony tear right through me. Because that was the first time in years she said she missed me, and it was only now that I was gone. I ended the call without another word. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad anymore. I was something else entirely. I was free, and for the first time in a long time, she finally felt the weight of losing me. But what she didn't know was that I hadn't disappeared. I was building something she'd never be allowed into again. The thing about grief is, it doesn't always come dressed in black. Sometimes, it shows up wearing your favorite hoodie, holding a grocery bag in one hand and a key that no longer fits in the other. By Friday, I had blocked her number. Not because I wanted to hurt her. Hurting her was never the goal. But because hearing from her felt like reopening the wound every time it began to scar. I needed the silence. Not the cold, weaponized silence we'd shared in our apartment, but the kind that gave me room to rebuild my identity without her fingerprints all over it. I focused on the little things. I started waking up earlier, not out of discipline, but because my body had grown too restless to pretend sleep could fix anything. I drank my coffee slowly, in silence, staring at the peeling paint on the balcony railing. I bought a new lamp. I hung up the first photo of just me I'd ever framed, one from a hiking trip I took before we were married. I hadn't smiled like that in years. Then, on Sunday morning, she showed up. I was in the kitchen stirring a pot of soup when the knock came, soft, then louder, then constant. I didn't need a peephole. I knew it was her. That rhythm was embedded in my bones. The same knock she used when she forgot her keys or wanted to avoid waking me. I considered not answering, letting her knock until the hallway swallowed her. But I didn't. I opened the door. She stood there in a long beige coat, eyes red, makeup smudged just enough to suggest she had been crying, but not enough to prove it. "I didn't come to fight," she said quickly. "You never do," I replied. She looked around the small apartment like it was a museum exhibit she hadn't bought tickets for. Her gaze lingered on the empty walls, the stillness, the noticeable lack of us. "You really moved out," she said, almost to herself. I didn't respond. I just stepped aside, silently offering her the chance to enter, not because I wanted her to, but because I needed her to see the world that no longer had room for her. She walked in slowly, like she thought she might break something. The moment her eyes landed on the framed photo, the one of me standing alone at the top of a cliff with wind in my face and freedom in my eyes, she flinched. "I don't remember this picture," she said. "Of course you don't," I replied. "It was taken during a time when I still knew who I was." She looked down. "I've been thinking," she started. "About everything. About what I threw away." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, waiting. "I never planned on replacing you," she said, her voice trembling. "I wasn't looking for something else. I felt like I was fading. Like no one saw me anymore." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how absurdly unaware she was. "You weren't fading," I said. "You were drifting, and pulling me under with you." She opened her mouth, then closed it. She stood there in the middle of my kitchen, hands shaking slightly, like she had something to offer, but no idea how to present it. "I miss you," she said finally, barely audible. I shook my head. "You miss the version of me that tolerated everything. The man who kept giving without asking for anything back. That man lived in our apartment. He doesn't live here." She reached out, not to hug me, not to beg, just to touch my arm. Her fingers barely grazed the sleeve of my shirt before I stepped back. That was when I saw it. The first crack of fear in her eyes. Not fear of me. I'd never been anything but soft, but fear that the dynamic had shifted. That the man who once sat silently at the edge of our bed, waiting for her to say anything, was now standing taller in a room she had no control over. "I just wanted to talk," she whispered, taking a small step back. "And I just wanted peace," I said. "Looks like we both found what we weren't giving each other." She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly, lips parted, like there was more she could say but knew it wouldn't make a difference. And then she left. No dramatic goodbye. No, "I'll wait for you." No promises of change. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind her, softer than I expected, but final in a way that echoed through the entire apartment. I stood there for a long time, unmoving. And then I did something I never expected. I smiled. Not out of victory, not out of spite, but because for the first time in years, I had no desire to chase after someone who kept leaving me behind. The strange part about healing is that it doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't tap you on the shoulder or announce itself in a grand way. Sometimes it slips into your life so quietly that you don't even realize it's there until you wake up one morning, pour your coffee, and don't think about her for a full 30 minutes. That's what happened the following week. There were no texts, no calls, no late-night knocks on the door, just silence. But this time, it didn't hurt. It wasn't the ache of abandonment. It was the stillness of release, like the emotional equivalent of unclenching a fist you didn't realize you'd been holding your entire life. I had started writing again. Nothing fancy, just thoughts, journal entries, fragments of poems I wouldn't show anyone. My therapist once told me that men like me, quiet ones, avoiders, fixers, usually bleed through pens before they ever open their mouths. She was right. I found myself writing about things I hadn't thought about in years. Not about her. Not directly. But about me. About the small compromises that add up over time. How you start saying it's okay when it's really not. How you bite your tongue when you should ask why. How you confuse keeping the peace with losing yourself. And just when I thought maybe the chapter had finally closed, I got the envelope. No return address. Just my name in handwriting that was too neat to be a stranger's. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Lyle, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe you've already moved on. But I needed to say it anyway. I'm sorry I made you feel invisible. I'm sorry I treated your softness like weakness. The truth is, I didn't know how to handle someone who didn't need to control me, hurt me, or make me feel like I had to earn affection. You gave freely, and I didn't know what to do with that. I confused chaos with passion. And by the time I realized how safe you made me feel, I had already taught you how to stop trying. You didn't deserve what I did, or how I handled it. I know it's too late, but I hope someday you'll remember me as someone who was just broken in the wrong direction. Take care of yourself. I'll always be grateful for the quiet way you loved me." See, I stared at the letter for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to my phone. I just sat there, reading her words again and again, trying to feel something new, but all I felt was clarity. She was right about one thing. I had taught myself to stop trying. But not out of spite. Out of necessity. Because some relationships don't end when someone cheats, or leaves, or screams. Some relationships end when one person stops being seen and the other doesn't notice. I folded the letter once, gently, and placed it in the drawer next to my bed. Not because I wanted to hold on to it, but because some lessons don't need to be reread, they just need to be remembered. And as I stood there looking around my apartment, I realized something else. She might have left the door open, but this time, I wasn't walking through it. I was already somewhere better. I saw her one last time. It wasn't planned. Just one of those moments the universe tosses your way when it wants to see how far you've really come. It was at a bookstore, the same one where we used to browse the used fiction section and argue over which author had the saddest endings. She was walking out as I was walking in, and for half a second, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because I did. She paused, eyes widening in surprise. "Lyle." I smiled. Genuinely. "Hey." We stood there in that strange limbo between two worlds that had once overlapped completely. There was no tension, no sharp inhale, just the soft awkwardness of shared history. "You look good," she said. I nodded. "I feel good." She blinked a few times, like she didn't know what to do with that answer. And then she said the one thing I never expected. "I read your article. The one about quiet grief. It felt like you were speaking directly to me. I hadn't known she'd seen it. I'd written it anonymously, a piece for a small mental health blog, where I poured out everything I'd learned about heartbreak that doesn't explode, but dissolves slowly over time. I guess someone had forwarded it to her. I wasn't, I said gently. But I'm glad it found you. She smiled then. A real one. Maybe the first one in years that wasn't twisted by guilt or confusion. It was strange. Beautiful even. And then we walked past each other. No tears, no final declarations, no promises. Just two people who had finally arrived at the end of a story that had lingered too long between chapters. I spent that evening back in my apartment, lights low, a soft jazz record playing in the background. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel bitter. I felt done, in the most peaceful sense of the word. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from getting closure from someone else. Sometimes, it comes from realizing you don't need it anymore. So here I am, weeks later, still writing, still walking every morning, still learning who I am without being someone's emotional crutch. And you know what? I'm actually looking forward to what comes next. Not in a big, dramatic way, but in that quiet, steady way that makes life feel full again. Thanks for listening to my story. Now it's your turn. If you've ever found yourself quietly rebuilding after someone walked away, or if you were the one who left and learned something in the aftermath, drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your peace. And don't forget to subscribe to Reddit Confessions for more true stories that dig deep into the human experience, the quiet victories, the painful truths, and the moments that change us forever. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.